Hello, welcome to your fairy tale wedding show. I am your host, Claudia Chen. Since your invitation set the tone of your wedding and let your guests get a glimpse of your big day, of course, we have to dedicate a special portion for the invitation. Here with us today is our talented Ashley Wyatt from Monarch Design Co., and she's going to let us know everything you need to know about wedding stationery. Hello, Ashley. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are
Welcome
you?
on the show. We're very excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Would you mind letting the viewers know how you got into wedding invitation designs?
Sure. So I've always been creative and wanted to kind of become like a fine artist or art teacher, kind of like throughout elementary school and high school. But I decided to pivot and I was really interested in graphic design.
Mm.
And I guess it's a little bit biased because I grew up in a household where my dad is actually a graphic designer and art director. So I've always been around that. After finishing, well, actually, I didn't get into the design program I wanted right away. So I ended up taking like an art fundamentals course at Sheridan.
Okay.
And then I finally got in, and from there I just fell in love with design and typography, lettering, and we were supposed to complete like an internship in our third year going into fourth year. There was like a whole bunch of ad agencies like on the list, and that's a lot like what a lot of my peers were doing. But I wanted to be different, and I loved editorial. I loved magazines. I loved like the typography and images on the page. So I took an interest in wanting to intern at a wedding magazine, which is Wedlux. So I interned at Wedlux magazine, and I was there for a couple of weeks. I saw like the behind the scenes of what it takes to create this publication, the behind the scenes of just creating like a styled shoot and like working with different vendors and sourcing like different like ideas and bringing it all together into like this creative shoot. And I really fell in love with that. Like I just loved all those different touch points. And when I finished school, I wanted to teach, but at the time I didn't have the means to go back to get my master's. So I started working different design places, advertising agencies, boutique studios. Didn't love it. And slowly, once Tane and I got engaged, I started designing like different things for myself. When we first moved to Burlington together, I didn't know anyone in the area, and that's kind of like where I found calligraphy and lettering. So I would come home from like a full day of working this 9 to 5 that I hated and just got lost in lettering because we worked opposite shifts. So I was alone most evenings. So that's kind of like how I filled my time. And accidentally started a business and went from calligraphy to teaching calligraphy to teaching now part-time at Humber College, and now really focusing on stationery and wedding paper. So
That is so awesome. You have such a wide variety of background. And I know you and Tane have your own company right now. Could you share with us your company, Monarch Design Co.?
yeah, sure. So originally called Tane and Ashley because we didn't know what to call ourselves. It started out as an Etsy shop. I found a local like laser cutting place, and when we were in school, we actually had access to a laser cutter, and we've been wanting to, find somewhere locally just to like make some passion projects, make some cool things for our own wedding, things for friends and family. So we started off making cake toppers.
Oh, okay.
And we did a lot of that, like with my own calligraphy and Tane's illustrations. Things just kind of shifted and evolved, and we went from more product-based to service-based. And so just last December, we decided to rebrand. I was building my portfolio of wedding stationery, and I was doing these flat lay photos where I style them in front of like my window and take some photos. I was just reflecting on like how far we've really come and evolved over the past like 2 years. I came across some Monarch butterfly stamps, vintage stamps. It just kind of like hit me. So Monarch butterflies have been very sentimental for us over like the past 6 to 8 months. So after my wedding, well, our wedding, my mom was actually diagnosed with breast cancer. And this came as like a huge shock for our family. And it was a really tough time. And it was in the summer. My mom had an F cancer. I don't know if I can swear on here, but she had an F cancer barbecue and had friends and family over. A monarch butterfly like flew by, and there's two of them. And
Wow.
my sister had mentioned like, oh, like I've been seeing these butterflies everywhere. And then I was like, oh my gosh, me too. And then my mom said, oh my gosh, me too. My grandma and my aunt, we all kind of like had this like, whoa, like, yeah, me too. So we looked it up, and apparently butterflies are a symbol of rebirth, growth. They're also like a sign from like loved ones and angels, that everything is kind of going to be okay. You're on the right track. Yeah, I don't know, ever since that, like even, throughout her time of treatment or just like when I was out and about, I remember when the teaching opportunity for Humber came about, I was at Starbucks with my mom, and I had my laptop in the car, and I got the email from my coordinator asking to send me my resume. So I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, like she wants to send it to the dean. So I ran out to my car to get my laptop so my mom could help me kind of like fresh up my resume. And two monarch butterflies flew right past my trunk as I was getting that. So something near and dear to my heart, and just like that everything is going to be okay and we're evolving. So yeah, just something special.
Yeah, it's always stories like this that touch me the most because I'm actually a full-time radiation therapist. So like
Oh,
we
wow.
see cancer patients, right? So like hearing stories like these is always very inspirational, and knowing that it is a disease that sort of kind of takes over the life and the family, but at the same time it also builds a lot of strength and hope. And yeah, it's really awesome to hear stories like this. So why don't we get back into the wedding stationery. And we start off with a few misconceptions. Misconception number one, we have to send invitations as early as possible. So what is the really good timeline in regards to sending invitations?
Yes, yeah, that's like a huge misconception. So typically, you'll want to send out a save the date around 8 to 12 plus months out in advance, especially if you have a lot of out of town guests or if it's a destination wedding. You're really getting your guests excited and giving them a heads up for planning. Typically, we tend to book stationery clients anywhere 8 to 12 plus months out, depending on our availability. If you have your venue are sourced out and booked, you are ready for invitations. So invitations should really be the next step, aside from your photographer. We do book up in advance. You need to send out your invitations 2 to 3 months before is kind of like the general timeline. But if you are having a destination wedding or have a lot of out of town guests, then we recommend doing either like 4 to 6 months out. But the reason being where you don't want to send them out too early is because guests might forget, they might not reply on time. So that RSVP deadline is usually 4 to 6 weeks before. This gives you enough time to get together your day of details, to send in your final numbers for the caterers and your other vendors. When you prolong this in between time, that's kind of like your headache time, because it's a lot of time chasing and following up with your guests. Is so-and-so coming, or they might forget. So typically, the first things first, send out your save the dates about a year in advance. That's kind of around the time when you should be booking your stationery designer. And then from there, we can narrow down your design and get started on your invitations.
Yeah, for sure. You don't want to send it out too early so that, because a lot of people still don't really know what's going on, like more than 3, 4 months down the road. You definitely don't want to send it too early and then you have to go around chasing them. On to our second misconception, that the guest list count is the invitation count. Now, about how many invitations should a couple usually order from you?
Yeah, so, and this is the main reason why I think people have this misconception that the price is too expensive. You don't need an invitation for every single guest. So your guest count is, let's say it is 200. Your invitation count would be half of that, and then you add a few. So it would be, your invitation count would be between 125 to 150 for a wedding at that amount. The reason being is because the invitations are actually addressed per household or per couple. They're not addressed per individual. So if you have a family of 5 coming, you would list the parents' names, so Mr. and Mrs. David Smith, and family to include children. There's a lot of like etiquette ways where you can kind of write out the names, indicate who is invited. A lot of like things are around, well, do I have a +1? Well, if your invitation is addressed to you and guests, then yes, you have a +1. If it's not, then you don't have a +1.
I see. I see. Just to ask you a little bit about that. If let's say they a household has a child or children who are a little bit older and they live out on their own and you still want to invite them and a +1, then you would actually address it to the children themselves so that they can have a +1.
Yeah, so family, like the mom and dad, they would get an invitation sent to them. And if children are a bit older, living out on their own, and they have a +1, then you'd actually send an invitation to them separately at their home address, and then have a and guest on the envelope. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the couple should be actually coming to you at around the 8 months to 1 year mark, like all right after they have their venue and date and times booked. Could you walk us through the process of when they come to you? How would the planning process be like in terms of making a custom invitation suite?
Yeah, for sure. So when we book your consultation, you come in and we have 2 questionnaires that we kind of go through together. Sometimes we'll send these out ahead of time and kind of go through the answers together just to narrow down. So the first questionnaire really talks about their specific style, the details of their wedding, the look and feel, like is it like whimsical and romantic, or is it very modern and elegant? We ask them about like how they met, how they proposed. We get to know them a little bit better. We even have a question on there like, where do you like to shop, like for clothing or like style wise, because someone who shops at Anthropology will have a way different style as someone who shops at J. Crew. So really getting to know you like on that personal level is really helpful so that we can kind of infuse your personality into the invitations. And then our second questionnaire is really getting down to the nitty gritty of things, talking about wording and etiquette, and do you want to include your parents' names? Do you want to include just your names? All the details that go onto the invitation. And then we'll start to kind of pull different samples off of our like display wall and play around with some paper swatches, narrow down color palette, and kind of get a sense of like how we're going to pull together all these details for you.
Wow, that's a lot of things to actually go through. And I actually read somewhere that a lot of couples who actually come to you first when they do their invitation, they actually have not much of an idea of how their wedding actually, like all the theme or the color will look like. And they usually tend to while working with their invitation designer, this is kind of where they flush out their idea of how the wedding decorations and everything looks like. Do you have anything you would like to say about that?
Yeah, so your invitations really set the tone of your wedding, and they kind of give your guests like a glimpse of what they can expect for the big day. So color palettes, infusing like all those ideas. Is it going to be more of like a laid back outdoorsy wedding? Is it going to be a more elegant modern wedding? Infusing those styles into your wedding invitation really sets the tone for what they can expect.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, also read somewhere that, like, if let's say you have to go get a wedding cake, then they'll ask you for your invitation to get inspiration for that cake so that everything it comes together. So this is really the one of the most important parts of the wedding planning process for sure. Other than some of the etiquette that we have already kind of mentioned, that there's some other ones that is very obvious, but when the wedding couples come to you, they don't usually know about that you would like to highlight for us?
I think some of the main ones are like, do I add my parents' names to the invitation? So this really stems back from a tradition of who is paying for the wedding. That's kind of where it's come from. But now in this modern day, like a lot of times couples will be paying for their wedding themselves, or they might have some help from family, or you might have like blended family situations that, you know, it might just be two wordies. So you can always do like a very simplistic line, like together with our families. A lot of people, I guess, don't understand what exactly goes on the invitation. So you want the couple's names, you want a date and time and the location of the ceremony. Can always add the reception location on here too, but sometimes it is too much to add if it is a different location. So in that case, it goes on the details card. That way we can like free up space on there. On the details card, it'll have reception info. Sometimes it'll have accommodations info, maybe a map, directions to and from. If there are parking instructions or shuttle instructions, those usually go on the details card too.
I see. Are there any other things or services additional to the invitation that you usually bring the wedding couple's attention to?
Yeah, so invitations are one part of your wedding stationery needs. We also offer day of details such as menu cards, place cards, signage, yeah, different things like that. Even thank you cards or like favor tags or stickers, anywhere that we can kind of like infuse those details from your wedding paper across all different platforms so it's consistent.
That's really awesome. It's very comprehensive list of service. So now that we're coming to a close, I know that you have a free gift to offer our viewers. Would you be able to let our viewers know what this free gift is?
We put together a little invitation guide, which just talks about why choose custom, a little bit about us, and it also has a really handy timeline. So you can kind of see when, when should you say or send or save the dates, when should you book your stationery designer, when is the RSVP deadline. And it's a really simple infographic that you can always like print out and just have it for reference in your wedding planning binder.
That's going to be very helpful for our wedding couples indeed. Thank you so much, Ashley. That's all for today. I am so happy to be able to chat with you and get to know you a little bit more. And it's great to have you on here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it was a very informative session, definitely. Thank you so much, and I hope I'll get to work with you one day.
Yeah, for sure. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.